أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير ثم أما بعد والحمد لله. Jazakumullah khair to everybody that's joining us today for this lesson, second lesson of our fiqh of trading. And let's of course start off by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In our first lesson last week, and in the lesson introduction, we spoke about a few important and foundational things which concerns the chapter of trading, kitab al-buyu' transactions. And we spoke about the hikmah and the wisdom behind why Allah Azza wa Jal legislated, permitted and showed the methods and the way of doing transactions and the way of trading and what He made halal and what He made haram, and the reason behind those generally, that Allah Azza wa Jal made transactions and trading halal for us so that we can benefit from one another, because everybody in this world is in need of somebody else for the manafi' of this dunya. And so the man with the money needs the man who makes the bread, and the man who makes the bread needs the man who for example sells the vegetables and fruits and etc. And so in order for everyone to be able to benefit from the works and the professions and the talents and the fruits of each other's work, Allah Azza wa Jalla legislated the method of transactions and trading. We spoke about some of the ayat. We mentioned some of the ayat which allow and legislate trading. We said وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً عَنْ تَرَاضٍ مِّنكُمْ. We also said that trading is halal. Generally, trading is halal. Transactions and trading and doing business generally is halal according to the Quran, the Sunnah, the Ijma', the consensus of the ulama from the beginning, the earliest of time from the Sahaba up until now. Nobody has said that trading completely is wrong or haram or makruh or anything of that sort. We also then said we defined what trading is, and we went by the definition which was given in the Kitab Badai' al-Sana'a fi Tartib al-Shara'i by Imam al-Kasani rahimahullah, in which he says that the definition of trading is the exchange of something desired, to give something desired in exchange of something else that's desired. So something that's wanted, something that has got value, all of that comes into that. We also spoke about some of the primary conditions of trading of those who are involved in transactions. So we said that those who are involved in transactions, there are some conditions which they must meet, and inshallah we'll speak about them in detail, but we'll just sort of touched upon it as a summary or as a quick overview. We also spoke about some of the key foundational principles as to what we can trade in and what are the things one is allowed to trade in. So we said, I'll remind you once again quickly, right? We said that from the things which, from the conditions which are related to the commodity or the product that's being sold, is that first and foremost it must be a lawful product. We are not allowed to sell something that is unlawful according to the Sharia. Secondly, the commodity must be available. Now this word is very important, because a lot of the misunderstandings, problems, transactions which are void, invalid, fasid, batil, they will often fall under the category of not being available. And so the commodity must be available, okay, and in the capacity of the trader to hand over to the buyer. Thirdly, we said that one of the key principles of the commodity is that it must be known. Just like the price must be known, similarly the commodity, exactly what it is, the descriptions of it, what it looks like and everything that's related to it, it must be known. We said these were some of the conditions related to the commodity. This is just, again, like I said, an overview. We'll go into it in detail, inshallah azza wa jalla, in our coming lessons. We also said, just to remind you once again, that the conditions related to the buyer and the seller is that there must be mutual consent, number one. They must be, the traders, both of them, as in the buyer and the seller and the buyer, must be of age of understanding or puberty, be legally accountable, mukallaf, they must be sane, and so on. We said also that the third condition was that the one who is selling must be, and the one who is buying also, the one who is selling must be the owner of the property or a representative of the owner of the property that is being sold. And similarly, the buyer must be the owner of the price with which he is buying, or a representative of the person or a representative of the person who is the owner of the price with which he is buying. Generally, that there should be ownership of the property that's being sold, and these are the conditions of. So I said that seller and buyer, consent, puberty, legally accountable, being sane, and etc. And thirdly, that the seller and buyer must be the owner of the property with which they are commencing or doing the transaction. That's some of the key things. Kitab in front of me, من فقه المعاملات المالية, which was compiled by one of the professors in our university, Al-Azhar al-Sharif, and which we covered and studied and were examined on. And so we'll be going through some of the things from here, bi-idhnillah azza wa jal, in order of our discussion. We've said that the definition of a transaction, the rukn of it, the main thing which makes a transaction come into existence is ركن البيع هو مبادلة شيء مرغوب بشيء مرغوب. That the primary rukn, or the thing which makes a transaction, constitutes a transaction, is the exchange of something desired for something else that's desired. Now this exchange, how does it happen? We need to understand. How does it happen? Who does it happen by? And etc. We'll come into one by one. So first of all, the method in which this exchange happens could be by lafz, by actual words, and the representations of wordings. So what do we mean by that? For example, if somebody wants to sell something or somebody wants to buy something, then a way to form, or the primary method of forming a transaction, is by words. Okay, so for example, I will sell you this for £5, and he or she says, I will buy this from you for £5. So this is the first and the primary method of transactions, which is by the word, lafz, qawli. Okay, to use words to commence or to create the transaction. Now, this word, of course, can be sometimes said, and at other times this same wording could be written down. So what that means is, just like we can commence a transaction by wording, we can also commence or accept a transaction by writing. So for example, someone writes to somebody that I would like to sell you my car for £1,000, and the other person replies by saying, I would like to buy it for £1,000. There are some conditions to each scenario. With words, there's also conditions. The transaction, there's conditions. With the transaction that's done by writing, there are also conditions. And there is also the third option, which is by indication or ishara of someone who cannot speak or write. So the person who can't speak and can't write, he also has the power and the rights to commence or agree to a transaction. Okay, but he or she, how they do it is different from how a person who can speak or write does it, and there are conditions to that too. In essence, what we're saying is that this exchange of goods, the first and foremost way of commencing a transaction which exchanges goods, price for commodity, okay, is by verbal proposal and consent, proposal or acceptance. If not verbal, then by writing. And if the person can't speak or can't write, then they are allowed to indicate with a sign which is understood from them, in the country or the region or the city that they come from. So if a person who cannot speak or cannot write makes an indication, but if that indication is not understood to be either a proposal or an acceptance, then that's also not valid. However, if that indication, that sign language, the sign that they show, indicates that they are willing to sell or willing to buy, then that's valid. Now we've said that this is the first and the foremost. I'll repeat a little bit because we need to understand slowly, step by step, because it's a foundational principles. Okay. So that's that. This is the first and foremost. There is also another way of trading, which is not using any words or any writing or any indication. This is by just exchanging, just merely by giving the price and getting the commodity. This is called al-bay'u bit-ta'ati, by giving and receiving, without any wording or without any communication as such, communication of language as such. But the communication is rather of just giving the price, and that could happen, for example, in various places. For example, you go to a shop, a newsagent, and he says, for the chewing gum is 50p, you give the 50p and you take the product, you haven't said a single word. That's called al-bay'u bit-ta'ati, which is just by actions. So we've understood this so far, that the transactions could be constituted verbally, in writing or indication, or just by exchanging by hand. There's one more word we spoke about last time, but I'll say it again. There is, to constitute a transaction, there are two parts. There are two individuals, and from them there are two parts, the proposal and the acceptance. So the proposal is basically to say, would you like to buy? Or to say, I would like to buy. So the proposal is what comes first. There isn't a rule to say that the proposal must be from the buyer or from the seller. The buyer can say, would you like to buy? Similarly, the seller, so the buy and the acceptance, al-ijab and the qubul could be qubul could be from any side, but it's generally what comes second. We're clear so far, yeah? Okay, very good, alhamdulillah. Let's now move on. Now let's come to when it comes to the words that are being used. We're going to start from the top. Words that are used for transactions. What are the conditions of the words that are used in transaction? Can you say any word which is understood to be able to form a transaction, or are there certain rules and regulations? First of all, اللفظ هو الأصل في التعبير عن الإيجاب والقبول. That wording and words are the original way, as we've said before. Okay. واللفظ الذي ينعقد به عقد البيع عبارة عن كل لفظين مستعملين لإنشاء البيع في عرف البلد والقوم. Now the two words, or the word that's used, it's any word in any language that expresses a complete intent, a complete and a firm intention or a firm desire to buy and to sell. So we can't say that for you to be able to trade or to buy and sell, you must use a particular Arabic word. That, for example, bi'tu wa ishtaraytu. No, it's any word that indicates a definitive and a 100% sure desire to either sell or to buy. Okay, and that could be in Bangla or in Urdu or in Arabic or in English, it doesn't matter. Or it could be just a click of a button on eBay, or could be a click of a button on Amazon, or could be a proposal that you sent out to hire a property somewhere in Lake District for the summer. In any way, in any language that's understood between both of them. Now, there are of course some conditions. Generally it's doable in any language, but even with that, there are some conditions. كما ينعقد البيع بتعليق على الرغبة. Okay. أيضا لفظ السلم والهبة, and there are a few other words. Now, ولا ينعقد البيع بإقرار الطرفين. So we've said that if a proposal and acceptance were to exist, if they were to happen, then the transaction would be considered to be done. However, if, say for example, me and Sharif Bhai, I said to him that, for example, I said to him that last week I have sold to Sharif Bhai a car. And he said, last week I have bought from Imam Saab a car. Now this is something called iqrar, this is confession. With confession, would a transaction be completed? The answer is no, because this is informing. So what we're saying is the transaction, for it to be formed, the wording that's used must be one which indicates initiation. Initiation now, happen now, or has already happened in just right now, at this moment, fil hal. However, if I confess to something that happened in the past, this confession could be true or false. If I say, for example, I have sold to Sharif Bhai something in the past last month, then this would not constitute the ijab or the qabul with that respect. Now, so now let's come to exactly what word is desired. What is the best way? What is the best verb to use for us to constitute a transaction? The best way to form a transaction and the best type of verb is to use the past tense verb, meaning the immediate past tense. For example, I have sold to you, or I have sold to you this car for £500, and you said I have bought. This is the immediate past right now, ماضي. Or بعتك هذا الشيء ب1000 جنيه. اشتريت منك هذا الشيء ب1000 جنيه. هكذا. So immediate past. This is the most concrete way of forming a transaction. Now, in English, we don't necessarily or generally say I have bought or I have sold. So you don't go to a shop and the guy says to you that I have sold to you this kameez for £10, and you don't say I have already bought. Our normal way of saying is I would like to buy this, or sell me this, or would you sell me this, and etc. Now, this is also allowed, but it's coming in the next few steps. Generally, the first and foremost concrete way is to use the immediate past tense. Secondly, also, another type of verb that's allowed for you to use in order to constitute a transaction is mudari', is a present tense. For example, I sell you this. I sell you this for £10. He says, I buy this from you for £10. Now, as you can see, there's a difference between saying I have sold to you and I have bought from you. This is concrete, finished. When you say I sell you and I buy from you, this is now present tense. You said, for example, in Arabic you'd say أبيع إليك أو أبيع لك هذا الشيء أو أشتري منك هذا الشيء, so on and so forth. Now, in this scenario, there are some intentions that we must look into. If the present tense wording is used, then in that case, one must look at the intention of the seller. If the seller or the one that's doing the proposal, whether it's be the seller or the buyer. Are we on the same page so far, yeah? Because I'm speaking, obviously, it might sound a bit abstract, but we need to stay with it. If it's past tense, it's finished. If it's present tense, then we must look at the intention. If the intention, okay, if the intention of using the future tense or the present tense verb was to constitute a transaction, then in this case it would be accepted. So for example, I sell you, and he was intending. So for example, it says أن يراد منه إيجاب البيع. When he said I sell you this, he's not intending to inform, rather he's intending to propose. Does that make sense? So when I say I sell you this, the intention could be to inform, or the intention could be to basically propose for a transaction. So if the intention was to propose for a transaction, and when the buyer said, I buy this from you, if his or her intention was to accept that transaction, then in this case, the mudari' or the present tense that's being used would be accepted. However, if the present tense that you're using, that for example, I sell you this, and it says, I buy from you this, okay? If it did not have any intention whatsoever, then this transaction would not be valid. For example, he is saying, I'm selling you this with no intention of proposal. I am buying this with no intention of acceptance, then that would not be valid. Also, if the present tense was used with an intention of the future, for example, I sell you this, but he's intending next week. And the other person says, I buy this from you, but he's intending tomorrow, then also this would be invalid. So we've said, if it was with the immediate past tense, then the deal is sealed. However, if it's with the present tense, then we must see what's the intention behind it, because it has a probability. And we've seen in Kitab al-Nikah also, when something isn't clear and distinct and 100% clear, then intention goes into play. So now, because with the lafzul mudari' or the present or future tense, the intention isn't clear, the intention must be clarified. So the intention of proposal must be with the present tense, and the intention of acceptance must be with the reply or with the acceptance of the proposal. We're clear so far? We're talking about the types of words which can be used to constitute a transaction. We've said lafz is the original, then kitaba, writing, then indication, then also by exchange, mere exchange without any words whatsoever. Now we're going from the top. From the lafz, okay, the types of word, the wording, what types of words can you use? We said immediate past tense is accepted. If it's future or present tense, then we must see what the intention behind it is. We're clear so far? Okay. Now, تفضل.
So what's the relevance to all of this to me? Let's say you and I had a transaction,
Yep.
we used the past tense.
Yep.
So what?
That means the transaction is completely fine. The wording of it and the way that it was constituted, it was formed, there's no problem. However, if he said to me, for example, he said to me, Ashik Bhai, or whatever, he said, Imam Sahib, I sell you this car. I sell you this car. And then I said, for example, I buy this car from you. Okay? Now, if you just say, I sell you this car, that does not constitute a concrete proposal of selling, sorry. I sell you this car could be informing. Could be informing about something that happened in the past. It could also be referring to something that's going to happen in the future. It could also have no intention whatsoever. I sell you this car, you're just saying it for no reason. Does that make sense? And so therefore the intention must be clarified when it comes to the present or future tense. And now when I say to you that I buy this car, then also I should intend from that I am buying it. I am actually accepting your proposal. That's how it applies in a reality situation.
So with the past tense, does that mean I've accepted the transaction, therefore I have to pay?
No, all of that is coming slowly. We're just talking about the transaction being constituted. The paying, when do you pay, how do you pay, when do you exchange the goods, it's all coming slowly. We're just talking, first of all, that trading is the exchange. And this exchange happens with an agreement. This transaction, this verbal transaction or this verbal exchange. This verbal exchange, how is it constituted? That's what we're dealing with so far. This verbal agreement, it could be constituted or made with immediate past tense, or it could be made with present or future tense. If it's with immediate past tense, then it's finished. If it's with present or future tense, then we must look at the intention. If it was intended that he wants to commence on a transaction, and like I've just explained now. Does that make sense so far, yeah? Okay. Now we come to another type of wording. Okay. If now someone was to ask a question, so it's not past tense, it's not present tense, it's istifham, it's a question. For example, someone says to someone that, will you sell me this? Will you sell me this for X amount of money? And the person says, I will sell you this. Now, okay, أما صيغة الاستفهام كأن يقول المشتري للبائع أتبيع مني هذا الشيء, will you sell me this property بكذا, for this price? Then he says, the seller says, بعت, I have sold. So understand what's happening. This is something a bit technical here. He says, will you sell me this? It's just a general question. Will you sell me this? And then he says, I will sell you this. Does that mean the transaction is now finished? The transaction is not completely finished yet. Because the first question was only to inquire as to whether or not this property is for sale. Does that make sense? And now if we were to say that just because the buyer said, I will sell you, it's finished, then there is some harm in that. And so therefore, if the transaction is initiated with a question, then there must be a third reply. So he says, will you sell me this? Initially asking, is this product for sale? He says, I will sell you. In fact, this is for sale. Then now for a third time, the initial question I must say now, I have bought it. So that the deal is sealed. Do you see? Because the question could have many meanings. Just to ask generally, or just to ask. Some people ask for various reasons sometimes, right? And so this is the general ruling, that if the transaction is to be constituted or to be made with the question of will you sell me this, then just by the seller replying I will sell you this doesn't complete it. Rather, the initial questioner then must for a third time or for a third comment say that I have bought it. Does that make sense? Take an example on eBay. Okay, you message someone saying, will you sell me this car? Now the buyer says, I will sell it to you. Imagine that was the end of the trade. Would that be fair? Or would that be reasonable? Or on any other platform, you go to the market, you say, will you sell me this? And then he says, I will sell you this. Then even in our worldly life, or today's day and age, you wouldn't consider that to be a complete transaction. Until now, when the seller of the product emails you back saying, I will sell you this stuff, then you say, okay, fine, I purchased it. Then afterwards, you'd have to send the payment through PayPal or through card, etc., and then it'll be posted to you. That's clear now. That when it comes to immediate past tense, it's sealed deal. If it's future tense, then intention is taken into consideration. If it's a question, then it's not just about the first question and the second answer, rather a third comment must be added to complete the transaction once and for all, and that's for what it is for, istifham, for questioning. So we're going through the different types of verbs that can constitute a transaction. What if it was the sighat al-amr, a command, that you commanded somebody? For example, أما صيغة الأمر كبعت كبع واشتري ونحو ذا. For example, sell me this. If you sell to someone, you go to someone, sell me this phone. And the other person says, I will sell you this phone. Does that mean the transaction is finished? It wouldn't be fair once again. If somebody was to come and command and say, sell me this, and he said, I will sell you this, if the transaction was finished there, then this would not be fair. The opinion of the Hanafi school of law is that if it's the sighat al-amr, the verb of command, to command somebody, if you command somebody to sell you something or command somebody to buy something from you, then just the commanding and the response, the second response, will not constitute a transaction. However, the school of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah accepts this. They say that even if it was the command phrase, and there was a second acceptance, or the second comment, which is the acceptance, then that in itself would finalize the transaction. And he does this qiyasan, or he does this basing it on the nikah. Nikah, if you say, for example, to somebody, marry my daughter, okay, and he says, I have married your daughter, then this is finished. Now this chapter of nikah, in our Hanafi school of law, they maintain that we cannot do this qiyas, because this is qiyas ma'al fariq. There's a difference between the agreement of nikah and the agreement of daily normal transactions. How so? Because in that chapter, the chapter of nikah, we have had clear nas or direct indication from Quranic and Sunnah evidence, or Sunnah evidence, to say that that is allowed there, over there. However, in this chapter of trading, with sighat al-amr, with the verb of commanding, if someone was to command to sell or command to buy, okay, the second comment alone would not be allowed in order to finalize the transaction. Okay, so how does it work? So ثم عاد المشتري. So for example, فإن وجد القبول ثالثا فالبيع ينعقد. Just like with istifham and questioning, there has to be a third comment. So for example, sell me this, I will sell you this, fine, then I will buy it. That third comment must be there to seal the deal. Are we together so far? With istifham and amr, with questioning and commanding, is the same procedure. There must be a third comment to absolutely finalize and seal the deal. So now we've understood in terms of the wording that can be used for making a transaction. What are the different types of words? Now let's come to the next part, which is just by exchanging without any wording whatsoever. Okay? This can happen in various ways. For example, فبيع التعاطي ينعقد إما بالدفع من الجانبين وإما بتسليم المبيع للمشتري وتسليم المشتري الثمن. So it could be, for example, that they both together, one person gives the money and the other person takes the property, commodity hand in hand or immediately. Or it could be that the price is paid and slightly later the product is delivered. Or it could be that the product is delivered and then the price is paid. All of these things are possible, and this is all allowed in the method of transactions, with transactions of just exchange without any wording. Of course, from there would be some other things that you must remember, that the price is known and the commodity is also known. Those rules still remain. So when you are exchanging without any words, the price of the product is known to the customer. Okay? And also what the price of the property of the commodity is known to the customer and of course to the buyer. To the customer and to the seller. And similarly, what the product is being sold, that must also be known for the exchange to be clean and allowed and completely halal. So we've understood that. Remember I said to you that without using words, there is also the possibility of writing. So writing is also allowed, just like writing is allowed for you to commence a aqd of nikah, or to cancel or to end a contract of nikah by talaq. All of that is allowed with writing. Similarly is the case in the chapter of, and I make that reference because we studied that just recently. Similarly is the case in the chapter of transactions, that one is allowed to commence the transaction by writing. Okay. يجوز أيضا فيها بالمكاتبة، والمكاتبة قد تكون من الطرفين أو من طرف واحد رسالة ولفظ من الطرف الآخر. So it could be writing from both sides. That, for example, Baisab writes to me and I write back to him to say I've accepted. Or it could be that he writes to me and I answer by word. Or it could be that he proposes to me by word and I reply by writing. All of this is possible. In any case, we understand that transactions by writing is very much possible and allowed. But the condition, some of the conditions is that, first of all, it must be known specifically who this writing belongs to. The owner of the writing must be known specifically. So if a random person just says a random letter without it having your signature, your name and address and all of these things that specify who you are, okay, your identity, without that, the transaction will not be possible. Similar, and that could be, of course, you can see that in today's day and age, you can make a proposal online, you can make a proposal on any selling platform, and etc. But it must be known who the seller and the buyer is. If it is unknown buyer or an unknown seller, and that the writing or the email doesn't have a clear sign who it is coming from, it could be a fraud, and so therefore that would not be valid.
It's a question. What if the seller doesn't actually own the item and they're advertising on their platform? They're saying they're selling maybe iPhones, for example, and the buyer goes to the platform and they buy it, but they don't actually buy it from that seller. They're drop shipping it from another company. How does that work?
Okay, so you as a person, for you to sell something that you don't own is fasid and unallowed. This is not allowed from the beginning. Khalas? So for example, we'll come to the end. In fact, it's coming in just in a few pages, but I'll say it since you asked the question. So for example, you are selling something that you don't own. Okay? The buyer accepts it. And you are then also able to deliver that property. But because the contract was initiated on falsehood, or invalidly, or in a illegal way, the fact that you don't own the property and you're selling it, now that you've delivered the property, the seller or the buyer will still have a right to cancel the contract because of this illegitimacy that was there at the beginning. If the buyer accepts after knowing that you didn't own it, okay, then the transaction will be passed, it will be sealed. However, one will still be sinful for doing it in the wrong way. The fact that you sold something that you do not own. Does that make sense? Now, if, say, for example, this is looked at from a different angle, that you are just a mere advertiser, then that's something else, of course. For example, you can have someone advertising on your behalf in the market, I want to sell you, something is for sale, and then that's that. You're not claiming to own the property, you're just a mere representative of the company. So this is called al-wakala, or to be a wakil, a representative. That's completely fine. So if you are a representative, for example, we have various companies that do this. For example, Avon was one of those companies they used to do before. They have representatives that go around and sell and etc. We had before that there was also what's that kind of plant aloe vera. So they used to have that also. And that goes for anywhere. If you're a representative and you're not claiming to own something, then that's okay. However, if you're claiming to be the owner of something, and then, but you don't actually own it, Baisab asked that question last week as well, I think, and then you're selling it, then that sale will be wrong initially. However, if the transaction was completed and the product was actually delivered, okay, then at that moment, like I said to you before, I'll repeat again, the buyer will have a right to carry on with the transaction or to cancel the transaction because that initial step was based upon a wrongdoing. However, even if the buyer then accepts and carries on with it, one will still be sinful for doing that transaction against the legislation of the Sharia. And that sin, of course, may not be held to account in this dunya, but in the court of Akhirah, one may be questioned about it. I hope that تفضل.
Just a clarification. So if the seller was doing what the brother just said, he wouldn't want to advertise that to the one he's selling to. Oh, I don't have it. I'm just a representative, in fear of the buyer not wanting to buy from someone who doesn't have the product.
Therefore, it's not allowed. Because if you're claiming to own the property and you don't, then that's a lie, first of all. Secondly, there's a possibility you'll find in this chapter of trading, anything that can lead to argument or dispute is blocked up from the roots. So now this could lead to disputes. At the end, you'll be like, hey, you told me you had this property, but you actually, even though you've delivered it now, but you never had it back then. So what's going on, bro? Why'd you do that to me for? That's one kind of dispute. Another kind of dispute could be more severe, that you can't actually deliver the product. It goes out of stock, you can't find it, your contract with your provider goes wrong or something like that. All of these possibilities. And so our Sharia way of trading is very, very clean, that you must own the property. It doesn't have to be in your hand like we said last week, but you must own the property for you to be able to then sell on. And that's a key foundational principle of the formation of the transaction, that you must be a legitimate seller and a legitimate buyer, meaning, of course, with the conditions of bulugh, of aql, and etc., but also by being a legitimate owner, or the legitimate seller or buyer, that you own the thing with which you are about to make that transaction. So if a child was to go then and say, buy something on behalf of their parents, let's understand, this will make a bit more sense. So a child under 18 goes and buys a contract of some sort, or a TV, or a house, okay, on behalf of their parents, using their credit card, the debit card, whatever, okay, and then the parents find out at the end that in fact it wasn't them, or it wasn't themselves, or the buyer finds out. Then at that time, what would be the possibility that you can actually cancel that contract? It should be the case anyway. There should be a fair trade possibility, or some sort of fairness in that possibility, that you should be able to cancel it because of this misunderstanding or something that went wrong there. Okay, so this is similarly, this is an example on the other side, that the thaman and the price wasn't owned by the person who's claiming to pay it. And the first was the example that you gave of the seller selling a property or a product that they don't actually own. So we're speaking about writing, right? That writing, you can also do it with writing as long as it is known exactly who the writer is, who the sender is, who the buyer is, and the writing is clear. Of course, hacking is a possibility in today's day and age. And so if it is proven by confession and also by evidence that this was in fact done by hacking or by somebody else using your phone or by using your email, then that could be investigated, and in that case that would not be a valid contract. It should be invalidated, it should be cancelled. And nowadays, because a lot of these transactions are done through the medium of the banks, banks usually help out with that as well. So if a transaction is just done, they're usually able to refund that or to dispute that or to cancel that, especially because you claim that, hey, it wasn't me, this product. In fact, it happened to me recently. Somebody bought something with my credit card, or my debit card in Paris. So like, that wasn't me. Okay, so essentially that card is holding my prints, as in it is me, it's a representation of me, it has access to my bank account. So that was reduced from my account. So I called my bank and said, no, this is not me. So they basically gave that money back. So that's an example of how, or that's not an exact example, but we understand that the writing must be known, who it's from, who's receiving it, and etc. Both sides must be known in the writing. We've said before also that the ishara, the indication of a person who's not able to write or speak, is accepted. If you are able to speak and write or write, but then you still choose to use indications, then that's not valid for you, according to Sharia. Even though according to a culture it may be okay, but according to the clean and pure form of transactions, according to Sharia, it's not the recommended way, it's not the right way. So for example, someone says to somebody, would you like to buy this phone for £100? He can speak and he can write. Instead of speaking or writing, he says. So for him, this answer is saying, that's not valid. This is not the right way to reply. You should say, I have bought it, or yes, I'm taking it. Something like that. Or at least write it down. If it's in speech, then you can write it back. Like we said, that when it comes to speech and writing, the proposal could be in writing and the response could be in writing. The proposal could be in speaking, the response could be in writing. The proposal could be in writing, the response could be in speaking. So all these differences are possibilities. But the point being is, if you can speak or write, you can't use indications as a substitute. The substitute indication is only permissible for the person who can't speak or write. With that also is the condition that the indication or the sign language that's being used is understood in that culture to mean what's intended, either proposal or acceptance. So someone who can't speak or write says, for example, just an example, and the person says, then that's, for example, a sealed deal, right? These kind of sign language that could possibly be used. So far we've covered this much, that transactions are formed by agreement of exchange. This agreement initially is done by lafz, by wording. What types of words are accepted? We spoke about madi, we spoke about present and future tense, the intention that's required. We spoke about question, in the form of a question, in the form of a command. We spoke about this also. Then we spoke about also the concept of trading with just exchange, without any wording whatsoever. We spoke about trading with writing, and we also spoke about trading with just indication. We spoke about all of this. These are the different forms and possibilities. Now we come to some conditions that are added to the transaction. Some conditions that are added to this agreement that's happening. There are some additional conditions that go into it for it to be correct, and for it to be accepted. Okay, I'll give you an overview, even if we don't do all of it today. I'll give you an overview of it. So شروط الإيجاب والقبول, okay, that لا يكتفى بمجرد الوجود الحسي لكل منهما وإنما لابد لهذا الوجود الحسي من شروط. That there must be other conditions with the existence of the agreement. There are a few other conditions. For example, from them is number one, موافقة الإيجاب للقبول. That the proposal and the acceptance must be agreeing with one another. Does that make sense? So in this there are 5 things that we'll mention. For example, someone says, I sell you this car for £10. I sell you this phone for, I sell you this car for £1,000. Another person goes, I buy it from you for £500. Then there, the proposal and the acceptance is not matching, and so therefore that condition is not met. Okay. From it also is اتحاد المجلس في الإيجاب والقبول في عقد البيع, that for the transaction to be complete, the sitting must be one, meaning there must be the moment of transaction. We'll say moment because you might not be sitting. It's called majlis, which literally means majlis means sitting, but it means the moment of transaction, okay, must be one for the transaction to be accepted and completed. What does that mean? It means that if somebody made a proposal and the acceptance was to come in that same moment, that moment could be 5 minutes, that moment could be 1 hour, that moment could be 2 hours, that moment could be longer than that. What does that mean? For example, you're sitting with your friend, okay, in a meeting, in a dinner, and etc., and you say to him, would you like to buy this property? Would you like to buy this? And then he doesn't speak, he just thinks about it for a long time, for 5 minutes, for half an hour, and then he responds by saying that yes or no. So this moment could be longer or shorter. For the transaction to be valid, the proposal and the acceptance must be in the same moment. What does that mean? That means that if Amin al-Bay said to me, would you like to buy from me this? Okay. Then I went quiet for 5 minutes for thinking of whatever reason. And then I said yes, then this transaction is valid. Why? Because the moment is uniform, it's the same. However, if Amin al-Bay said to me, would you like to buy from me this? Okay. Then I just, for example, I didn't give any answer whatsoever. I just moved on with life. The transaction is not valid. Or I took a long break. I started to talk about something else, changed the topic. Then I said I accept. Then that's also not valid. Because there's been a separation between the proposal and the acceptance. All of this is done in order to avoid any disputes. Do you see? So
I think about it.
That's even if you didn't use the word I think about it. If the moment isn't uniform, if the moment of the transaction, of the proposal and the acceptance. So I'll give you an example on eBay, right? Or any other platform. You add something to your basket and you begin a transaction. Okay? The transaction will now go to the payment side of things. Will give you a set window, say for example 5 minutes, right? Until Barclaycard or whoever, HSBC, they process that. Now if that time period finishes, then what will happen automatically? That will be cancelled, right? For you to then initiate another transaction, you'd have to start all over again, that particular part. It may still be in your basket, But then that particular moment of the transfer of the money we'll have to restart it again. And so therefore that's an example for you to understand, okay, the fact that the moment of the transaction where the proposal and the acceptance happens must be uniform. Now this proposal could be longer or could be shorter, like I said. So it could be sitting in one place, or it could be walking, or it could be in a train, it could be in a bus, it could be on a plane, it could be on a phone call. So long as the moment of that transaction and the discussion is still ongoing, then you have a right to accept or to reject. If you've accepted, you've accepted. If you've rejected, you've rejected. However, if you've moved on to a different topic without finalizing that topic, then you come back to it, then that's not considered to be accepting it. All of this is done, like I said before, to avoid any disputes, to avoid any sort of disagreements or disputes that could happen in the future.
Let's say you and I go out to a restaurant,
Yep.
we sit for 1 hour,
Yep.
we start off saying I want to sell my car.
Yeah.
And I say, well, let me think about it.
Yep.
We talk about everything else, right at the end before we leave, I say I accept.
Okay, so in that case, I will then have to, for a second time, say, okay, fine, I've sold it to you. I'll have to confirm that once more, because in that hour's time, he might have sold it on eBay, he might have bought it on Amazon, he might have gifted it to his wife, he might have gave it to his friend. He could have changed his own mind. So now that you've started, you've reopened the window of proposal and acceptance, that moment must be uniform once again.
So if there was a second person, say there was 2 or 3 persons,
Yeah.
and you offered it to one person, you said, I want to sell this, and he's not responding, but you're in that moment, and then someone else says, I'll buy. Can you do that?
Yeah, that would also be possible, but then it would require also from the first person to say, fine, I'll sell it to you. Does that make sense? So he said, do you want to buy it? He's not answering, but you said, I'll take it. So then I still have a choice of saying, no, I don't want to sell it to you. But then if I say, fine, I'll sell it to you, then that's finished. Because then now your response to my comment initially has now become the proposal. And now I'm accepting for the second time. So initially I proposed to him and his response didn't come. Now that you've responded, your response has in fact now become the proposal. And now I answer by responding by saying, okay, fine, I'll sell it to you. Does that make sense? Of course, with the fact that you know the price and you know the property, you know the community, all of which will come to slowly, inshallah. We also come to another, from them, inshallah, we'll cover in detail next time, bi'idhnillah. Ittisal al-qabul bil-ijab, that the answer, so this is also connected to the moment must be one, but also specifically, the answer, the acceptance of the proposal must be actually connected. So there must be indication in the language that you use that you are referring to the first proposal that was made. So the moment must be one, and also the agreement of the contract must also be indicating the fact that you've agreed to that proposal first. Does that make sense? So, for example, any one of the brothers or anyone said that I'll sell you this for £10, okay? And so the moment must be one. I must say within that moment, or even if it's afterwards, then we must just do the exchange of the words once again, or the exchange of the writing, and like we've said before. But also that in my answer, I must express that I would like to exactly buy what you proposed to me. What you've proposed exactly is exactly what I would like to buy. And what I'm giving to you is exactly what you're demanding. So someone might only sell in dollars, or in pounds, or in rupees, or in taka, whatever it is. So ittisalul qabuli bil ijab, that the proposal or the acceptance of the proposal, the acceptance must connect with it for the deal to be sealed. Inshallah, we'll talk about it a bit more and explain everything properly next time. There's one more thing, fourth thing as well, is that the proposal must still be standing when the acceptance happens. Does that make sense? So the proposal is still there. It's still the proposal, just literally the proposal is still there. Your proposition, is it still there? If it's still there, then we can then, or someone can then accept that proposition. So these are some of the primary conditions which relate to the ijab and qabul, the proposal. So these are the conditions of the proposal and the acceptance. I've mentioned an overview, inshallah we'll go to them in detail next time. Then we'll come to another section which talks about mubtilat, the things which can nullify the proposal and the acceptance. So as you can see, this is not a lesson of just 1 or 2 fatwa. We are covering the chapter of trading slowly, okay, step by step. So then by the end of it, you yourself will have an idea of what's allowed, what's not allowed. Of course, individual masail still require fatwa, for example, forex and etc. There are a few masail that come up here and there, shares and stocks and all of that. These are individual masail with individual cases and individual markets and individual commodities and etc. The whole lot of it. But this is the general rules and regulations which are related to the chapter of trading. Okay, Jazakumullah khairan for your attention and for your patience. May Allah accept from all of us. If there are any more questions, we'll end it here for today.
I've
Tafaddal.
got three, two related,
Subhanallah.
one unrelated. Sorry.
Tafaddal, no problem, take your time.
First one, with auctions, they don't say anything. They just pick their whatever hand up or number up. And
Yeah.
isn't it?
So with auctions, this is also allowed because the proposal has been made, okay? And here, in this scenario, okay, even though the hand is just to indicate your interest or your expression, you would then eventually have to write or sign a contract as well to transfer the ownership of the property as well. So that would be an addition of indication as well as, okay, you might not just, you put your hand up or put your number up, you might also say a word. But in any case, it would be finalized in that method. If someone just put their hand up and ran away, then that auction wouldn't be complete in that respect. That probably would go back into auction again and etc. So there would be in fact a finalization, a third response to that.
So people who can speak and they just indicate, like the example of buying the car.
Yeah.
Would that, if the car was sold like that, the transaction would be valid? I mean,
So then if the car was sold like that and the exchange of the goods already happened, okay, the exchange of the goods already happened, meaning after the moment of agreement, the proposal and acceptance, there were further steps taken to then finalize and verify this transaction, then yes, it would be validated because of further steps. But that initial method isn't correct. If you can speak, you speak. If you can write, you write. You only indicate if you can't speak or write.
the one who indicated, would it be sinful?
Well, if he was intentionally trying to do it to bypass the rules and regulations of Sharia, then he would be sinful. But if it was just because of jahal and ignorance, then he may have a leeway, inshallah.
And the last one, in regard to the beard, I've had a few, looked around and
Yeah.
asked about it. But the local brother that I asked a few years ago, he said, I asked about the length of it and all that. He said to keep it neat. And I don't know whether he was referring to just the way it was, my beard was at the time or what. What's the position that you take?
And that's not a fiqhi answer.
All right.
Keeping neat is a recommendation. It's just like something. It's a nice thing to say. But as for the length of the beard, okay, there are not one, numerous ahadith which says that lengthen your beard. Some say lengthen, some say let it go, some say be different from the mushrikeen and lengthen your beard. So the lengthening of the beard is not just one particular indication. In fact, there are hadith that say this is a sunnah of the Anbiya generally. The Anbiya generally, it is a sunnah of them that they keep the men, they keep their beard. Now, this extension is established. Okay, shaving is very difficult to justify. To completely shave off and leave no traces of beard whatsoever, one could easily say it's haram. One could easily say it's haram because of the amount of ahadith that show that you should, Prophet commanding directly, and wal amru al wujub, command refers to mandatory being mandatory, something being mandatory, and it's not just one, it's many. Okay, and sometimes with the illah, with the reason, without reason, etc. Direct command to a group of people, etc. So now opposing that command directly and completely is a sin, no doubt whatsoever. This is by the nas of the Quran and by the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. For you to oppose the command of Allah, the Rasul, is not allowed. Now we come to, what if somebody kept this much, this much, this much, and that much? That's the discussion. The moment somebody has kept any amount of beard, that initial disobedience of keeping nothing at all, you've stepped beyond that. You've now kept something. Does that make sense? From here onwards, there are various opinions you'll find. Some of the scholars will say that you should just let it go and never touch it. That is the opinion of some of the scholars. Others will say that in fact, the Prophet ﷺ has said to lengthen, but he didn't specify exactly how much to lengthen. However, there are from the Sahaba examples of how much we should lengthen it. From the Sahaba, for example, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu and other Sahaba, the length of their beard, how much was it? From there we find that they used to grab a fist from the bottom and remove the rest. Now this is important. Why? Because the Sahaba are doing something, are embodying, are emulating, are fulfilling a commandment of the Prophet ﷺ, and they are showing how it should be done. That's why it's important. One may say, well, Ibn Umar done that. What's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal because he's a Sahabi. And a fi'l of a Sahabi, the action of a Sahabi, it can be evidence based upon conditions. And in this scenario, because there isn't a direct command from the Prophet ﷺ as to how much we should lengthen it, the action of the Sahaba indicate or teach us what that length should be. So keeping a fistful and removing the rest is permitted. It is allowed. In fact, a lot of ulama will argue this is the closest to the sunnah. To enact the recommendation of the Prophet ﷺ and also the practicing of the Sahaba. Does that make sense? That's basically, you've sealed the deal again, right? Now we come to shorter lengths. If it is a shorter length, even if it is just up to the length of the stubbles, even if it is any form of beard that you can call a beard, some fuqaha will argue that you can still call that a beard, and so therefore he is not completely disobeying the Prophet ﷺ. So what's important is from all of this is that it is very important to have some sort of a beard. The correct sunnah is to keep one fist, and what we should all in fact try to have intention to keep that length, because that is the most correct way to embody and enact the command of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Several years ago, I was thinking of selling my flat. A brother offered me some money, and I said, let me look into it. I'll be happy to sell at that price if I can sort out the tax. He went and did the survey, and I couldn't sort out the tax situation, and I said, sorry, I don't want to sell. And I refunded him. He done the survey, he spent some money, so I refunded it too. Have I done anything wrong?
No, you haven't done anything wrong, because you haven't agreed to a contract.
I agreed to the price he offered.
But you conditioned it to let me have a look at the market.
Yeah.
So therefore, it wasn't a complete and a thorough agreement. It was conditioned upon let me have a look at the market. And even then, the moment wasn't uniform. The moment in which he proposed and he agreed wasn't uniform. So even if you were to then sell, you'd actually write up a second contract or a proper contract to say, I propose and you sell, and etc. like that. So you haven't done anything wrong. And you giving him the money for the survey, unless you promised him to do that, then in that case there was no need for you to give that. But because you done it out of the goodness of your heart, alhamdulillah, but there's no requirement of you to give that as well, because he done that as a research for his own, something that he's interested in. And that's not, so for example, I want to buy a BMW and I go and ask someone to do like a HPI check. I pay £2. I can't go to the company and say pay for the HPI check. That's my own thing that I done myself to confirm something. So it's in that same category. So inshallah, you haven't done anything wrong, and it should be fine. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.